So let me introduce these guys very quickly, although they really don't need an introduction. This is Chuck Porter, who just joined us from Crispin Porter and Bogusky. I'm formerly the chairman of the 4As. Tor Mirren, who is the president, CEO, and chief creative officer at Gray, New York. And Steve Williams, who's the CEO of PhD here in New York. So these very courageous men have agreed to talk to all of us women about how we too can be the boss. So would you start a little bit by how you ended up being the boss? And I'll start with you, Steve, if you don't mind.
I think it probably dates back to somewhere on a sports field where something got ingrained in me about how to sort of work amongst other people. I never had a single plan in my life in terms of career. I played a lot of sport at school, a lot, and all sorts of different teams and levels and leagues. And that's really the only place I can recount why I've ended up where I am now, because I got into being I left school when I was 16. I became a chef because I thought that's what I always wanted to do, and I learned how not to do it in a kitchen. It was the most gruesome environment ever in the kind of early, mid-late 80s. Awful place to be, run by men, one woman in the kitchen, and this was a big hotel in London. Hated every second of my experience there, and I guess learnt how not to do it in some regard. Fell into advertising, again completely unplanned, and worked hard and had fun. And I suppose the shortcut of really saying it all is I think at a point in time I went for the gap. So I could see where we didn't necessarily have leadership that certainly I could empathise with. I didn't want to carry, I was a trader, I was a negotiator by trade in the world of media. I didn't want to carry on doing that, but I wanted to go broader and I wanted to impact people. Didn't really know how at that stage, but I just went for the gap. And managed to carve a niche, do certain things that we weren't doing for our people. And then subsequently, again, I think one thing I learned was you have to, certainly in my instance, you have to be liked and respected in equal measure. I think if you read, lots of business books, there's not a lot of like going on. So I think you've got to be good around people, enjoy being around people, but have that like and respect, like being liked and respected in equal measure. So that was how I sort of fell into what I'm doing now, and I had the opportunity to do so back in London out of a full-service creative agency, BNP, as they were known then. So very privileged to grow up in that environment. And had the opportunity to go from there. So really did absolutely fall into it. But fundamentally, I think I was half decent at what I did, but I really enjoyed being around people, and I turned that into my career.
I think I'm actually in the right place now. If I think back on my parents, actually, I think that's probably where it all started for all of us, right? My mom was a social worker and a writer, and a total hippie and never wore shoes. And my dad was a big-time businessman, so no surprise they got divorced when I was 6. But I think I sort of took parts of each of their brain and took it on my journey. I think the most influential thing to me ever was Star Wars. I'm not joking, actually. I swear to God. Like, I saw that movie when I was 5 or 6, when it was 1977 it came out. And it just blew my mind. And like, I knew that day that I wanted to like write stories and tell stories and sort of create different worlds. And it was like the most, I'm not kidding, it was the most influential thing from that point forward for me. And then my professional journey is I would say has just been one of enormous risk-taking. I mean, most of the jobs I've taken, every single person in the industry told me not to take, especially this last one, which is going to Gray 5 years ago, when it was arguably the worst agency in America. I mean, you could make that argument. There are those who have made that argument. But even before that, I went to Detroit for 3 years in a time when Detroit was very down. And so, I mean, they were not exactly popular decisions by most of the people in our industry or anyone that knew anything about advertising. But they were sort of risks I wanted to take. So I guess that's how I ended up here.
I agree with Steve and Tor, and now I'm going to say exactly what they said, only in slightly different words. I don't know. It's a hard. I never had any ambition to be a boss, and I never really didn't have. I didn't really have a drive. I just never wanted a boss. You know, I mean, it's true. From when I was in law school, I had a mentor who had just graduated from law school, and we were sitting, and he was telling me, well, here's what's going to happen. You're going to join a firm, and for 6 years, you're going to do research and do. And I thought, okay, I would rather die. So, because I never really wanted to work for anyone, so I would still be. If someone hadn't offered me half an agency and my name on the door, I'd still be a freelancer. So, I mean, it's true. My whole idea through the whole thing is I don't want to work for anyone. So I just ended up in a situation where someone said, well, I'll give you half the agency and I'll put your name on the door and I'll make you the creative director and you can run it. And I said, okay, well, that'll work. So that's my story. I mean, I don't know if that's valuable or not, but it's true.